You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. So could you remind me, CD, who are on the panel? The name of the people on the panel, could you remind me to make sure that they are on call?
So yeah, it's you, Dr. Pirzada, and Soyebu Kebe.
Serigne Cheikh Fatma? Oh, okay, Soyebu Kebe. Okay, you're right.
No, Serigne Cheikh Fatma is on your next call.
Okay, thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first panel, the second panel of the virtual pre-conference celebrating Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba Day in New York City. As you may know, the main event will take place on the 28th with another virtual conference and events taking place in Harlem. My name is Shaykh Anta Babu, and I will be moderating our panel this morning. And it's for me an honor to introduce our main speaker of today, Dr. Ahmed Pirzada, joining us from London or from Birmingham in England. Dr. Pirzada earned a BA in Arabic and 2 masters, one in philosophy and another in politics. He did his dissertation work at the Department of Theology of the University of Birmingham in England, where he wrote a dissertation entitled The Epistemology of Ahmadou Bamba. This dissertation makes a unique and invaluable contribution to the scholarship on the Muridiyya, which until recently was mostly dominated by anthropologists, sociologists, and political scientists, mostly interested in the economic and political dimension of the Murid order. We are fortunate to have Dr. Pirzada with us today. I have a lot more to say about his many qualifications, including being an accountant and a consultant in teaching economics, but I will keep it short today for the sake of time. We are already running out of time. We are 10 minutes ahead of schedule, behind schedule, I mean. So we're going to listen to Dr. Pirzada for about 10 to 15 minutes. CD, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then for the remainder of the time, we will be listening to comment and contribution from the other members of the panel, Sheikh Soyebu Kebe particularly, and others that have the ability to join us here. So Dr. Pirzada, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. It's a pleasure to address you today on a very important issue, which is Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba's legacy of non-violence. So I'm going to basically read this little paper I've written. It's not very long because I knew I'd only have 10 to 15 minutes. So let me start straight away. I'm only going to address the first paragraph briefly, and then I'll read the rest out, more or less as it's written. I hope you can see it on the screen. Okay, now there has been a significant degree of academic activity on Ahmadou Bamba for more than half a century. The issue, I think, is that this only to a limited extent is it in terms of Ahmadou Bamba's own thought, ideas, and writings. So that's what this paper wants to challenge. If we speak about Ahmadou Bamba and non-violence, let's speak about non-violence in terms of Ahmadou Bamba's own ideas. Going to paragraph 2, one of the most important challenges in any discourse regarding Ahmadou Bamba is to persuade people to take him on his own terms. A mystic whose life was based on devotion to knowledge and worship and to community formation may be more profitably interpreted on terms that are his own. Now, we are fortunate that we have a large volume of writings from Ahmadou Bamba. If you go to the library in Touba, you see how many hundreds of books he wrote. And in those writings, he transparently stated his concerns and ideas. Now, Ahmadou Bamba and non-violence is a typical example of what I'm addressing, that we need to interpret Ahmadou Bamba on his own terms, not in terms of, as Sheikh said just now, that in terms of what the anthropologists or the sociologists want to understand. What did Ahmadou Bamba mean by non-violence? So there are 2 aspects which need to be addressed. First of all, what is non-violence with regard to Ahmadou Bamba? What does he think non-violence is, and how was it applied by him? These are 2 different questions. Now, I have not found this distinction in the literature at all, not the distinction of what is non-violence with regard to Ahmadou Bamba and how was it applied. Usually we don't have this distinction at all. So the ontological question of what Ahmadou Bamba means by non-violence is almost never addressed by anybody. We look upon, Ahmadou Bamba versus the colonialists. That's how it was applied by him. So I have not found this distinction in the literature. The first question may require, that is, what is non-violence with regard to Ahmadou Bamba? It may require a somewhat theoretical answer. Whereas one may seek a more practical answer to the second question of how did he apply non-violence? As far as I know, there has been little published on the first question. And if anything has been published on the second question, it addresses Ahmadou Bamba's struggle against the colonialists and his use of non-violence as a response to colonialism. So now I would not seek to relegate the anti-colonial aspect of Ahmadou Bamba's life, particularly as he lived the last 33 years of his life in exile and under house arrest. My contention is merely that it is necessary to regard the second aspect, that is his practical struggle using non-violence, as being based on the first. In other words, to formulate a discourse with regard to Ahmadou Bamba's legacy of non-violence as praxis based on his own theoretical ideas and concerns with regard to non-violence. Now, this is very important, otherwise we get the whole thing inverted. If we don't know what Ahmadou Bamba means by non-violence, what is the point of merely looking at how he applied it? So going on, nowadays, when we think of non-violence, we may think of such figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Contrary to Gandhi in India, for example, the non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba was not a purely tactical or strategic type of non-violence, born of a philosophical dogmatism and used to secure a negotiated settlement with the British colonialists, thus facilitating a peaceful transition to independence. That is not to say that Gandhi did not hold, Mahatma Gandhi, we can't say that he did not hold his views on his religious and philosophical views seriously, but rather that he had gradually become intellectually convinced of their correctness and thus decided to adhere to these views. Now, there is a big literature on this. Gandhi's philosophical evolution through grappling with various religious and philosophical ideas until he came to adopt a certain form of Hinduism, a non-violent form, is, for example, a very popular study is B.R. Nanda's study on Mahatma Gandhi, published by the Oxford University Press in 1989. It shows you clearly the religious and philosophical evolution of Gandhi, the intellectual growth of Gandhi, where he grows to adhere to non-violent ideas. This is altogether different to the case of Ahmadou Bamba. His gentleness was primarily due to spiritual reasons, which must be regarded as the basis for the non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba, whereby he had attained a lofty spiritual station and had been divinely endowed with a laudable nature. An analogy between the reasons for the non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba and the reasons for the non-violence of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was made by Ahmadou Bamba by himself in the Qasida Mafatih al-Jinan wa Maghaliq al-Niran on pages 4 to 8. Now, I only have 10 minutes, and this is a 60-page Qasida. So, and if I really was going to speak at length, I would have spoken for at least half an hour on this Qasida. But okay, I'm only going to speak for 2 minutes on this Qasida. Now, it's a 60-page Qasida, okay, but one of the main points is, in the case of Ahmadou Bamba striving to imitate the Prophet totally, this had led to him being close to the Prophet and thus gaining spiritual purity and the protection from God. This is the point that the Qasida seeks to make. On page 6, Ahmadou Bamba states, "My religion is the love of God and the love of the one by whom the enemy is suppressed." In other words, the love of God and the love of the Prophet are the weapons which Ahmadou Bamba is going to use to suppress the enemy. Page 6 of Mafatih al-Jinan further states that Ahmadou Bamba was forgiven and purified. He states, "He, God, purified my existence as a servant." And on page 7, he says, "My Lord eradicated my evil. How wonderful is my Lord." Having reached this station of closeness to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and having gained purification from God, he was now protected from harm. Again, on page 7 of Mafatih al-Jinan, Ahmadou Bamba states, "He directs dislikable things to other than me. He protects my sanctity." And also, Ahmadou Bamba states, "He repelled harm to other than me." and so it was repelled. To summarize then, and I'm speaking very summarily here, 60-page qasida, I'm speaking about it in 2 minutes. The non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba consisted of him striving to imitate the Prophet, which had led Ahmadou Bamba to, number 1, gain purity and a lofty spiritual nature, number 2, enjoy the eradication of all his evil traits, and 3, to receive divine protection in the face of a hostile enemy. Therefore, this divine approach to non-violence was altogether different to Gandhi's approach. Now, what are you going to call this divine approach to non-violence? Are you going to call it non-violence of Islam, Tawhidic non-violence, non-violence of the unity of God? What term are we going to use? I'll come up with a term. Let's see what you think of it. For Ahmadou Bamba, it had become a form of non-violence born out of certitude, as God had assured him that he would be preserved from all human machinations. Therefore, before the colonial authorities sought to adopt aggressive tactics against Ahmadou Bamba, he had already received certitude of divine protection. Right, so I would like to utilize the term transcendent non-violence, something that transcends material, in other words. The word transcendent has many meanings you can apply to it. There is a Kantian term and so on and so forth. But transcendent in the sense of something beyond material means. So transcendent non-violence can be applied to as a term which describes the non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba, as opposed to an ideological type of non-violence which Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King applied. Furthermore, I would like to suggest that looking at Ahmadou Bamba's non-violence solely in terms of the politics of colonialism would be to miss the main point of his life's work, as stated by him, which involved striving to undertake personal spiritual growth and to create a society which was within these parameters. You know, that's the presentation I want to give. But you know, Ahmadou Bamba said, "Ujahidu bil ulumi wa tuqa." His main struggle was with knowledge and piety. So this was his main concern. So his non-violence needs to be seen in that light. So I hope I haven't spoken for more than 10 minutes. I think that's my 10 minutes up. So I'm very happy to take any questions any of you have.
Thank you so much, Ahmad, for sticking to the time and really for introducing to us a kind of hermeneutics and philosophical examination of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba thinking of non-violence that certainly is missing in much of the literature on non-violence in Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. And what this does is not only really thinking of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba as non-violent from within, that is taking seriously his own thinking about it, but it also removes us from this understanding of the history of the Muridiyya and the history of Islam in Africa in general as just a response to colonialism. So what you're telling us here is that these practices and these ideas are very much rooted in a long genealogy of philosophical understanding of non-violence that take us back to Prophet Muhammad. Thank you very much for bringing this perspective. Now I would like to invite Sohibu Kebe to share his thought about this, either as a short contribution or as a question. And then after Sohibu, I will open the floor to others to comment.
You are on mute, Sohibu. Unmute. Move. Sohibu, you are on mute. You got to unmute. You may want to go. You may want to log out and come back in.
Okay, these are the vagaries.
Okay, it's good now. It's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'm so happy to be with these great scholars and ulama talking about our Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba and his legacy of non-violence. I'm so happy to be with First of all, I have to give a special thanks to Professor Sidi Njai, who gave me this opportunity to participate in this debate. And I'm very happy also to be with Dr. Pirzada, whom I love a lot, because I have the opportunity to read his book about Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, how to say, epistemology of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba. It's a good book, mashallah. And just I want to comment on his lecture in 2 points. First, the root of non-violence in Islam. As Dr. Pirzada said, many people discuss the idea and the practice of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba of non-violence, but in only one angle, whether politically or sociology or in other angle, but not in Islamic view and Islamic view of life. I think that the base of non-violence of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba is rooted in, as Dr. Shaykh Babu said, in Islam teaching, in Islam religion. If we look at the Hayat al-Anbiya, if you look at the life and practice of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam and his Sahaba, his companion, we see that they are the first who practice this non-violence in their life. The Prophet himself, before he immigrated to Medina, he was prohibited to use weapons to defend from the attacking of the kuffar. He was ordered to follow a sabr. And if we read Quran, the ayat and verses that was revealed before the Al-Hijrah, we see so many verses talking about as-sabr and وَلَمَنْ صَبَرَ وَعَصَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ, who practice as-sabr. He is one of the best of al-azm. And we see the Sahaba alayhim salam, alayhim ridwanullah, was persecuted during that time, and they was using sabr, patience, and never used weapon to defend against themselves. The Prophet himself was, when he go to Taif to seek for having support from people of Taif, he was badly treated there. They throw stone to him, and they mocked it at him. But when Jibreel came and told him that Allah, if you want to curse them and to send a punishment on them, they will disappear right now, and God will crush these two mountains on them. But the Prophet ﷺ forgive them and said, may Allah will bring some believer from their seed. So this is the practice of non-violence. And we see Al Yasir, some of the Prophet companions, they were persecuted, and some of them was killed, and they never used weapon And even in the first one who practiced this non-violence is Habil. If we read Quran, we see that وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ الَّذِي آتَيْنَاهُ Habil said to his brother Qabil, لَإِنْ بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَيْكَ لِتَقْتُلَنِي مَا أَنَا بِبَاسِطٍ يَدَيَّ إِلَيْكَ لِأَقْتُلَكَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. If you want to kill me, I'm not wanting to kill you. Why? Because I have God-fearing. I'm God-fearing. I have fear of God, the Lord of the universe. إني أريد أن تبوء باسمي واسمك فتكون من أصحاب النار وذلك جزاء الظالمين. This is the first person who practiced non-violence. He was his brother wanted to kill him, but he never used weapon to defend himself or to kill the person who wanted to kill him. So Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, when he came to defend the interests of his people, he just practiced the teaching of Quran, the teaching of the prophets, and the teaching of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. But the second point I want to say is that the characteristic of non-violence method of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, we have to put light on. The non-violence for Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba doesn't mean to accept, to be humiliated, to be bad treated. Doesn't mean how to say a negative peace way of life, that you accept all bad things in your life without reacting. Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, as Dr. Peter Sada said, use the method of al-jihad bil-ulum bil-tuqa. And if we want to understand his method of non-violence, we have to read these qasida, Ya Jumlatan, qasida Ya Jumlatan, and Laysa al-Birru, and Ilhamu Salam, mainly in Ilhamu Salam. In this, and Qasidatul La Taj'alu Du'a ar-Rasul, and so many other qasaid in Fulkul Mashun. The qasaid he called Qasaidul Jihad, the qasaid of jihad. In these qasaid, you find that Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba outlined and put a whole strategy of self-defensing, whether in the field of theology, the field of ideology or theology, moral and social and economic. Because khidma is one of his non-violence method. And I'll say, if you read Laysa al-Birru also, or Ya Jumlatan, we find that he put a whole strategy to fight against the influence of non-believer, the colonial French, by al-jihad bil-ulum bil-tuqa. He said, إني أجاهد بالعلوم وبالتقى عبدا خديما والمهيمن شاهد. And he explained all the weapon, but not a physical weapon, but a spiritual weapon. He said, سيف الذي يفري طلا من ثلث توحيده. He used other weapon, that is tawheed, that is al-fiqh, that is tasawwuf, that is love of Allah, love of the Prophet, and living the true life of Islam. that. And I invite Dr. Pisada to read again all these qasaid, ليس البر, mainly ليس البر and إلهام السلام, and لا تجعلوا الدعاء رسل, and I think he can find a lot of theoretical and practical of the non-violence of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, inshallah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sheikh Su'aibu. Thank you so much. I think I found your contribution particularly helpful for a student of the Muridiyah, and you have suggested important sources to deepen our understanding of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba's philosophy and practices of non-violence. But you raise really a question that I find particularly interesting. You use here the concept of self-defense, which most of the time people do not associate with non-violence. And I would like to invite Dr. Pirzada to comment on two concepts that actually came in Sheikh Su'aibu's own questions: the question of pacifism and the question of self-defense. Can we reconcile those two terms, pacifism, self-defense, and non-violence, in the writing and thinking of Ahmadou Bamba? Or if they are different, how do you parse those differences?
Okay. Funnily enough, you've touched on something that does trouble me here. What troubles me here is that we can see the non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba and interpret it as pacifism. What I would like to, I'd like to use a term with regard to Ahmadou Bamba. What I would call it, it's like I can't say vigorous non-violence. This doesn't make sense in English. Something like activist non-violence. You need some term like this, because Ahmadou Bamba was anything other than a pacifist. I think the brother, the way he spoke, more or less reflects my ideas. That if you see in the life of Ahmadou Bamba, if he was a person of a certain spiritual station of non-violence, he was so active in terms of creating a vibrant community. This is vibrant non-violence. Also, non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba is not turning the other cheek non-violence. This is not it either. You know, I see nothing wrong with the brothers and sisters in a community learning self-defense. I see nothing wrong with them learning martial arts. We teach our children here in London, we teach them boxing. I myself have boxed in competitions. So there's nothing wrong with this at all. So going to inner city communities in America and educating them in the teaching of Ahmadou Bamba, making real humans out of them, and at the same time training them physically, is a great thing. You know, I see the situation in America as a situation where you can't afford to be weak. And when I was in Los Angeles, some of the gangs had become Muslims, and they dealt with gang life, you know, in an Islamic way. And so, you know, I see, not to speak too much about this, to answer you very directly, the non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba, as far as I understand it, involves self-defense, involves human dignity, involves not bowing to oppression. It involves all those things. But the goal is to try to change the other person as well, to change the other person. Your high moral position, your supreme moral example is what changes the other person. So that's part of it as well. But to answer you directly, I don't see this non-violence as pacifism at all. I see it as very activist non-violence, which seeks to integrate certain higher principles into society, but in a vigorous manner. You know, sometimes it may be necessary for people to defend themselves. I think self-defense is no offense would be a slogan that Muslims would profit from. So that's how I see the non-violence of Ahmadou Bamba.
Thank you so much. If I don't have another reaction, I would like to build on what Dr. Pirzada said. So could we consider then the idea of passive nonviolence, active nonviolence? Can we make those nuances between the type of nonviolence?
What I think is that what my concern was this. My concern was, when I read the life of Ahmadou Bamba carefully, this is a very, very active life, a life of great activism. And for a person given to study and teaching and worship, the degree to which he involved himself in society to create a viable society, I think I feel that the desire to speak about Ahmadou Bamba as a very active, socially active person. You know, when we use the word pacifism, the problem with that is we seem to, there are religions, particularly Eastern religions, where non-violence involves yourself. What in the Hindu religion, there's a Sanskrit term called vairagya, which means that you are desireless. You know, you are sort of like, you're in a condition of desirelessness where you can even be separated from society. So Ahmadou Bamba's non-violence is certainly, without any doubt, socially active non-violence. That's the distinction I want to draw. That there is a social activism, a vigorous social activism in Muridiyah, a work ethic as well. The work ethic and the vigorous social activism is the distinction I'm looking for.
Thank you. Shaykh Ahmadou, would you like to add something to further clarify your own intervention?
Yeah. Because so many people think that if we say non-violence, it means like Sayyidina Masih, Sayyidina the Christ, when he said, if someone, how to say, if someone knock your head, give him the other side, and that means you, a Muslim or a believer must accept the badness in the society. And that is not the teaching of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu, fa in lam yastati' fa bi lisanihi, fa in lam yastati' fa bi qalbihi, wa dhalika ad'afu al-iman." If someone see munkar, something wrong, something bad in the society, he must act to change this negative thing in his life according to his means. If he can change it by his hand, like using weapon, we can say that, you have to do. And if you can't, you have to use another mean, by your tongue, by your speech, by your something like, trying to be active in society to change the bad things that happen in the society. If you can't to use all this at the time, you can change the things in your heart. And so many people think that the Sufi are pacific, non-violent. They don't use weapons. They are they stay in their how to say the al-khawaniq and the real Islam and the real teaching of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba is to be active, to try to change the bad things, but in the best way. In this case of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, we see that he lived in a society invaded by the colonial. They want to change their belief, their culture, their civilization, their way of life. All these is bad things, as munkar, as the Prophet said. And Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, has Ahmadou Bamba stay non-active and regarding the bad things happen in the society without reacting, without doing nothing? No. Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba was very active, and he used the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to change these bad things, because in our history we see so many other religious leaders who use weapons, like Shaykh Omar al-Futi, like Mabba Jahuba, and other religious leaders, and other even kings like Lat Dior or something like that. But Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba don't use all these methods, because if, that would lead the people, the population to destruction. So he used the best way to self-defense, to protect his people, is al-jihad bil-ulum bil-tuqa. And that is a continuation of the method of the prophets. There's nothing new, there's nothing, what they say, bid'ah in this approach, in this method of jihad. Is just ihya wa tajdid, is just revival of the way of the Prophet, because Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba was a mujaddid. So all he used to do in his life must be in accordance with the teaching of the Prophet. That's why he used the Islamic term, Islamic reference to find a good solution for the problem of his people, of his time.
Thank you.
That I want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So listening to you, Sheikh Suaibu, and listening to Ahmad, I was reminding of this thinking attributed to Ghazali, and of course we know that who Ghazali he is. When we think of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, he called him master. And Ghazali is reported to saying that the attitude of the ulama or the cleric toward the unjust ruler should be fight him with the tongue, the pen first, and if that can lead to fitna, then fight him with the tongue. And if fighting him with the tongue might lead to fitna, then hate him in your heart. Don't love him.
Yeah.
So this is what Ghazali said. And Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba himself, being a disciple of Ghazali, we clearly know that his thinking on non-violence was actually informed by Ghazali. And one thing you said, Serigne Souaibou, was the idea of Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba understanding clearly that military confrontation with the French would lead to the destruction of his people and of people. In fact, people will lose life. And that is the same attitude actually he had against also the rulers of the Wolof kingdoms before the coming of the French. So Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba has not changed. He has not varied his attitude toward the French. He was just continuing the same trajectory that he was in under the Wolof colonization. So Ahmed, then my idea here is, what do you make of the concept of maslaha then? Maslaha, the common good. So how does the concept of maslaha then fit in Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba's idea and philosophy about non-violence?
First, I'd like to say that to summarize the discussion to this point, and then we'll get to maslaha. You know, Al-Ghazali was reacting to the political problems of his time. So he was giving a response of what was possible in his time. Ahmadou Bamba was reacting to his time and given to that time. But I think my conclusion from a lot of reading of Ahmadou Bamba is that I think what Ahmadou Bamba is teaching us is the way to spread Islam in this time. That here we are in a time where we are living in societies where we can speak of Islam. You know, you can in your society, I can in my society. So we have this openness. There was a scholar, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, you may know him. He said that maybe we're in a time where you don't need to by force enter into a city to speak about Islam. You don't need to do jihad to open a city to speak of Islam. We're in a situation where we can actually go on an aeroplane and establish a conference for Ahmadou Bamba in any city in the world. So maybe in this time, the struggle is ujahidu bil ulumi wa tuqa, to struggle with knowledge and to struggle in terms of the example you're giving in terms of taqwa. I found even amongst Westerners, they only appreciate a logical argument. As I said, I was speaking privately before to Shaykh, and I was saying that I took some intellectual Westerners to some of the top shuyukh in the world, and they were very unimpressed, because what they wanted from the shuyukh was convincing intellectual arguments about spiritual matters. So this is what I think is what Ahmadou Bamba is teaching us, is how do you give da'wah in this time. Now, coming to the idea of maslaha, you see, it must be a Muslim, any scholar in any era, Ahmadou Bamba included, must adopt the idea of maslaha. That you must look at any situation. Maslaha wa mafsada is how you weigh things up. What is the benefit and what is the harm in doing something? That's the only way a Muslim looks at it. A Muslim, the hadith of the Prophet, you are not a believer is not stung from the same hole twice. In other words, he uses wisdom, he uses understanding, he looks at what's the benefit of this, what is the harm of this. So any fatwa that any alim who I've sat in front of has given has always been on the basis of maslaha wa mafsada. That's the way a Muslim looks at it. What is the benefit and what is the harm? So, you know, in Ahmadou Bamba's time, it was obviously of no benefit at all for people who are living, you know, mainly in villages to try to take on a French army which has modern weapons at their disposal. It was not possible to defeat this army in this way. What could be done, though, is Islam could have been, he established the basis for Islam to grow. For Islam to survive in Senegal and to grow and to create communities, functioning communities. Now, you know, there are many great sheikhs in the past. There's Abdul Qadir Jilani, Imam al-Ghazali, and so on. But they didn't leave communities behind. Ahmadou Bamba left a functioning community behind. So that's one of the great achievements of Ahmadou Bamba, that a community of believers that was based on teaching Islam and establishing economically independent units, you know, was a great innovation that Ahmadou Bamba left behind. That's how Islam survived in Senegal, I think. So yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So that's to answer your question. You can never look at any situation without the idea of maslahah. That has to be the basis of any understanding in any situation.
Thank you so much. So I had a sign coming from Sidi Njai. Sidi, do you want to open the floor to others to ask questions or to comment?
Maybe we can allow for one question. I know that Lamin Baki have pinged me earlier for a question. Maybe let's open the mic for Lamin Baki because the third panel is already checking in.
All right. So Sheikh Lamin, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Be in this panel, and I was very impressed with the work of Dr. Pirzada, and at the same time also with my cousin Serin Kebe. I actually have a question and a comment. And the comment was, if I hear what Dr. Pirzada said and what Serin said, it looks like the Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba, who said Ujahid bil ulum wa bituqa, and like the professor said, he put the right strategy according to his time and the challenges facing his time. But I noticing that he was a mujaddid and his main mission was to imitate the Prophet. But regarding the community he left behind, I think the Shaykh told his community that the main purpose of the Murid's war was to try to mirror the Sahabas. I think it's in the wall of saying he was even saying that the Sahabas are your fathers in Deen. Talking about nonviolence, talking about work ethics, talking about successful economic behavior, talking about political influence. And actually it's very interesting to me because I'm going to be presenting later on a presentation on Murid Economics, which I call Muridonomics, which I had the opportunity to introduce in 2017 at the United Nations, and which I'm working with an international university to publish a book, maybe by 2021. But the bottom line here, I noticed in what you both said is Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba's mission was to revive Islam and to spread Islam. And what we can learn from that, while sticking to true Islamic teachings, while trying to imitate the Prophet, while trying to mirror the Sahabas from his community, you can find that there's a lot of benefits, regarding nonviolence, regarding work ethics, regarding political. So you can have a lot of scholars, pinpointing the advantages of his teaching, the success of the Murids in economy and nonviolence and everything. But the bottom line is his focus was on to revive in Islam and to imitate the prophets, which is to say that my personal conclusion, I don't know what your I think Shaykh Ahmadou Bamba is an example of somebody who understood Islam more than anybody else, but who practiced also Islam more than anybody else. Because if you look at the Maqasid Sharias, if you look at the Maslahas, if Islam is perfectly practiced, you see a lot of advantages from that. From Islam that a lot of conventional secular systems are looking for.
All right, thank you. Ahmad, so we'll give you last word. I think we're almost up.
Okay.
Our time is almost up. I'll give you the last word.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Lamin, I'm actually a lecturer of economics in London. I lecture at London University. The point is that all of the ills that the Western economy suffers from, you know, all of this riba-based system that they have, which is mainly to do with speculation, where 97% of the money is actually created by hitting a switch. Only 3% of money that they have in their economy is actually from government mints. So this situation where money has no real relation to reality, this is precisely what an Islamic economy will actually prevent from happening, where you have asset-backed finance. So very true. I'm very interested in Murid economics. I wonder why you don't have a microeconomics project in Senegal. That's an excellent country where you give people small amount of loans. They can take a machine, sew clothes and sell them, for example. Exactly what was done in Bangladesh can be done in Senegal. I thought, when I looked at this country, I was there in 2018 for the Magal. I thought this is a great country for microfinance. You know, microfinance would be a wonderful project there. Yeah, there are many things that can be done according to Ahmadou Bamba's teachings. If he created dairas which were, you know, planting groundnuts, I'm sure if he was here today, he would, you know, be very high tech and deal with all the modern financial realities as they need to be dealt with. So yes, I think if you're writing a book on Murid economics, that's a great thing, because Ahmadou Bamba gives a very broad ability, a very broad-based brush for you to paint an economic picture from. So that's a great thing. I would love to see microfinance in the villages of Senegal. That would be a fantastic thing. I would love to see development happen in Senegal in that way. Yeah, so I do think it's very important that we have our own economic ideas, because I think within our lifetime we can see the crash of capitalism. From what I'm seeing, very quickly this system can come to an end. And the IMF and other institutions are looking at Islamic economics. Christian Lagarde says something positive about it. The IMF have done many studies of Islamic economics, meaning that they realize their system could come to an end. Okay, I won't speak anymore because I think the next people are waiting. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad Pirzada. Thank you so much, Serin Shuaibu Kebe, and thank you so much those who join us today. I think you've learned a lot today, and I am confident that we will keep the conversation going. Thank you so much, and see you at another time. Bye-bye.